Blessed to be part of your day. Big day today. The redacted Mueller report on its way. We will have that for you. I was going to say President Barr's news conference, but Attorney General Barr's news conference will have that for you coming up here at 7:30. Kevin Miller in the morning. Then it's Glenn Beck waking up on the right side. Let's get to John Tammy joining us from Freedom Works. John, good to have you with us.
Hey, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So here we are once again on this historic day. Your thoughts as the nation awaits, of course. I think the summary kind of took the air out of the sails, if you will.
Yeah, well, and I've got the columns to prove it. I ridiculed the very notion 2 years ago, not because I'm a Trump fan or a Trump hater, but the Russians were legendarily incompetent back in the KGB days. So we had to believe that some of the least competent people on earth working with, a few $100,000 could influence an election in the way that billions have failed to influence it with the greatest political minds in the United States for decades. The notion of collusion all along was completely ridiculous. Love or hate Trump, it was a very disorganized campaign. He ran it on a shoestring, yet we then want to believe that he got together with the Russians, and the Russians thought what no one else did. They were so politically savvy as to guess that Trump would win when the whole world knew he wasn't going to win. And, okay, let's fix this election. Shame on the Democrats. Shame on anyone for believing what was always so completely ridiculous.
Well, and it's strange that the media continues to roll with this. And you guys are a nonpartisan group. You care about the American people at Freedom Works, just like we do here at KIDO Talk Radio. But, I'm watching poor Rick Santorum last night on CNN explain about spying. And then you have Aaron Burnett using the Rahm Emanuel line. Well, it went through the courts. Well, just because something went through the courts doesn't mean that the evidence was pure and pristine.
No, exactly. And it was never serious evidence. And there are so many ways this, again, the legendary incompetence of the Russians for decades and decades. But also, does anyone think that any of this would have come up if Donald Trump had lost? Does anyone think that there would have been serious attempts to investigate this supposed collusion? Basically, the Democrats had decided they had won. Many of them had probably bought houses in Washington, D.C. based on the assumption that they were coming into a Hillary Clinton administration. And then the shot heard around the world. The shock heard around the world. Trump wins. And so they're looking for something. They're looking for something to explain why it didn't work out. And they happened on the most ludicrous notion of all, that the Russians of all people, managed to swing an election of a country like the United States. My goodness, historians are going to have a blast with this because I said this on the TV shows at the time. I am so embarrassed to be an American as people watch us obsessing over the Russians.
John Tammy joining us from Freedom Works. And the great thing about this is that they refer back to when the president tongue-in-cheek said, Russia, if you're listening, release the emails, which was brilliant theater.
Absolutely. Say what you will about Trump. I've criticized him a lot over the years, but he is good at political theater. What he's not good, I don't think, is at keeping organized and running a well-oiled campaign. What he did was he made himself the campaign. The idea that he then sat down and thought, let's get some people together in Russia, of all places, to fix this election. You've got to be kidding. This is so much. It's fun in a way, but again, it's embarrassing. The experience I felt during all the heavy breathing talk about it was once again one of shame. How could we as the American people so diminish our country by elevating a country like Russia and saying, oh, you guys control what happens here? My goodness, don't we have more pride?
Well, and it's not like we're talking about the days of the old Soviet Union.
No, we're not, but let's go back to the days of the old Soviet Union. We are talking about a country that was a disaster. The restaurants there were so pathetic. The menus hadn't changed for years. You go in and you'd say you want chicken. They'd say, no, you're going to get this. The country was devastated. It couldn't have fought a war to save its life. It was so desperately poor because that's what collectivism does. And remember, that was Ronald Reagan's big genius, is he came out and said it in the early 80s, said, this is going to die. Don't worry about that. Russia is going to fail. And so for all this time, as government so often does, we elevate the enemy. We made Castro into a major threat to us. We've made Iran into a major threat. Trump has made North Korea into a major threat. All these things that elevate the role of government. My goodness, Russia did not have the economy to fight any kind of war with the richest country on earth. That was never going to happen. The Russians, forget about if they wanted a war. They knew they couldn't fight one.
Our great friend John Tammy joining us from FreedomWorks, Kevin Miller on KIDO Talk Radio, 107.5 FM, 580 AM. So let's talk a little bit about, well, what the economic insight into what's going on right now. In other words, how are we doing economically?
Oh, it would appear that we're doing pretty well economically. What I generally tend to look at is I think the stock market is a forward-looking indicator in the future. It shows optimism among investors about earnings for companies in the future. And so one would think from that things are going pretty well. Let's be clear. Economic growth is the norm in free societies. Our natural state is to grow. And the reason for that is we want endless things. And how we get all the things that we want and need is we produce. And so when people are free, when they're not overtaxed, when they're not overregulated, when governments aren't putting up tariffs that limit their ability to import, when the dollar is stable, people generally tend to prosper. Trump's gotten part of this right. I think he's been wrong about the tariffs, but the dollar's been stable. I don't think the tax cuts were nearly large enough. But, broadly, the burden of government has shrunk, I think. And so, unsurprisingly, you're seeing better economic times. It's really pretty basic.
And speaking of basic, my knowledge of economics is probably sub-basic. But let me come back at you, Mr. Tammy. You're a guy at FreedomWorks. You tell the truth. What about the debt and the deficit? Y'all have been talking about this for years. We're spending more money than ever.
Well, here's my view. It may surprise you. I don't worry about deficits. What I worry about spending is spending. Let me explain why. What would we prefer, a $4 trillion annual federal budget that's in balance or a $1.5 trillion annual federal budget where we borrow $1 trillion of it? I think it's fairly easy to say that we'd rather that annual deficit of $1 trillion because how government gets the money is a distinction without a difference. All government spending to me is debt. It's not their wealth. They didn't create it. And so the goal to me is to limit the size of government as much as possible. And so I would, this notion of budget balance in the United States is something that would mean big government as far as the eye can see, simply because we're the richest country on earth and will continue to provide enormous resources to the federal government to waste. The spending is the problem. Every dollar the federal government has is more control it has over the U.S. economy, which means we prosper less. And so I think you understand economics intimately. If you agree that central planning doesn't work, then you agree that government spending doesn't work. We don't notice it much in the United States because we're such a large economy, but think how much bigger our economy would be if the size of the federal government was exponentially smaller.
Right. Although when we try to do that, what happens when you have people saying you're going to cut my entitlement program? And then we have the issue like Social Security, like Medicare, like Medicaid, where once every 5, 10, 20 years, it's going to go broke until we make an adjustment.
Oh, no, you're so right. And I think what you allude to, and FreedomWorks ultimately is nonpartisan. Republicans and Democrats neither have much of a desire to cut spending. It may surprise you what I'm going to say is I don't believe we should look at entitlements, and here's why. It's done. It was a mistake. And so my fear with entitlement reform is that even if we got major spending reductions, Congress would figure out new ways to waste the money saved. And so I don't think entitlement reform would lead to smaller government. They would find just some really new bad ideas to direct money toward. And so I think the focus has got to be on, okay, we made these entitlement mistakes. They're taken care of. They're going to be. Rich countries can take care of it. But going forward, let's reduce the level of taxation so low that government revenues actually decline. Republicans have got to start talking about what they claim to believe in, constitutionally limited government. There's so much the government does that's not within the Constitution. Start talking about that and why this should be left to cities and states. I'm not saying that's going to lead to spending reductions, but everything else we've tried hasn't worked.
What about at the local level? Now, we've known about FreedomWorks for years. Certainly appreciate your work, but are there things people here in Idaho or in Indiana or in Utah can do at the local level, like a FreedomWorks at a state level?
Oh, yeah, it's such a good question, and because people, what you're asking gets right to the heart of it. People always ask me, they'll say, "Oh, you're just anti-government," and I say, "No, I'm not. I'm the biggest liberal of all. What I'm for is governmental choice. If you want a lot of things, a lot of parks, a lot of swimming pools run by the state in Idaho, do it. But that should be your burden. If people in Texas, for some reason, want very little, that should be their burden. Choose your government by city and state." And so what I wish is that Idaho, Indiana, Utah would say, okay, our citizens pay a certain tax to the state of Idaho. They pay a certain tax to the city of Boise. That should be credited against what you pay to the federal government. I want cities and states to spend more money and for less money to go to the federal government. It's in the cities and states where we should be paying the majority of our taxes. The federal government is where we should pay the least amount simply because it should have so few functions. And so I wish the states would say, hey, we're going to take back control. These are the things we want. And because we're going to take control of social services, parks, you name it, let's credit what our citizens pay against what they hand over to you, Washington. We're trying to limit what you do so that we can govern ourselves.
Finally, if we don't get a handle on the debt, I know you're a spending guy. What are the consequences? We go back to Greece. And John, we've had a great run here. I would never think that most of us would believe that the recession, the reset of 08, 09 would be something that we would think about now as ancient history. I guess that's a tribute to the ADD world we live in here. But if we don't get a handle on our spending constructively, getting that ROI, what's ahead for us?
Well, people always say if we don't do something, tomorrow is going to be really awful. Well, you and I both believe in markets, and markets are already pricing tomorrow. You look at the 30-year Treasury bond, interest rates on them are very low. That's the market's way of saying the U.S. is never going to have a deficit problem, or at least it won't right now. But it does have a spending problem, and I think we've got to with all due respect, I think we've got to stop talking about it unless we get control of this, unless we make some hard choices. No. Cutting government spending is never a hard choice. Giving people control over the economy is a beautiful choice. It's what leads to much greater prosperity. So I think we've got to stop talking about, if we don't do this, we're going to be Greece. No, we're not going to be Greece. We're nothing like Greece. But if we reduce the size of government, every single American will have better opportunities, better job opportunities, more wealth, better living standards. Let's talk about it positively because that's what it is. It can hurt no one for the federal government to be smaller. It can only help people. And so let's talk positively, not about a day that might come. We've been talking about this all of my life, and to be fair, markets have laughed at us.
John Tammy from FreedomWorks. Appreciate you. We'd love to have you back. Of course, editor of Real Clear Markets, and author of Who Needs the Fed. And love your book on jobs, brother. Bought it, and I still love it, brother.
Hey, well, thank you for having me on. Appreciate it.
All right, John, stay out of trouble.
Will do.
All right, our great friend John Tammy joining us. Kevin Miller in the morning here, KIDO Talk Radio. Phone numbers 580-5436, 580-KIDO. Coming up next, the governor meets the press. No, that was just a cough. You're listening to Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio.
Is highlighting what he calls several achievements from the first 100 days of his administration. Those 100 days include the period from January 7th through yesterday, April 16th, 5 days after the end of this legislative session. At the top of the governor's list, something he emphasized at his inauguration and in his State of the State address, education. Governor Little signed legislation that will increase starting teacher pay to $40,000 per year. that doubled funding for programs aimed at improving students' reading abilities by third grade, and that increased opportunity scholarship funds and designated the state's first 4 STEM schools.
And I'm very thankful for the help from the legislature, from all the people over the state. Another part of my base was, what do we do as far as better opportunities for our kids? Better jobs, better incomes. And obviously, a lot of the work we did in the regulatory arena, I think, is going to pay off over the years.
On regulations, Governor Little issued executive orders requiring state agencies to eliminate or scale back 2 rules for every new rule they propose, and putting limits on future occupational licensing laws. The governor looks ahead to next year and talks more about the big issues of his.
And there we have it from Channel 7. So the governor and the legislature can find money for paying teachers. Nothing wrong with paying teachers. The governor can find money for STEM schools. Hey, that's great. The governor can find money for the little third graders. That's great. But the issue the governor didn't bring up, the issue that the legislature would like you to just blow off, are issues that you've talked about for years here. Number one, hemp, and we'll get to hemp. By the way, the folks from the Boise Hemp Fest will join us coming up. We will go toe-to-toe with them. Great article at KIDOTalkRadio.com about hemp, that we're being surrounded by the pro-hemp forces. But more importantly, as we start the day, waking up on the right side, maybe I'm wrong. Let me just play devil's advocate for once. And this show, and you have been so gracious to allow me to justify my existence with you. This show is, an opinion show. I had a young man yesterday tell me that I was bashing the Star ID card. And sometimes it takes a while to understand my humor. Sometimes it takes a while to understand my point of view. And for that, I'm just not an effective communicator. My point being with the Star ID card is that we fought it for years. I encourage the state to fight it. I think it's hypocritical that you have to bring in all this documentation, that you have to wait 5 hours, and that we allow illegals, as the president calls them, to come in without any documentation, and they can get on airplanes, and they can do this, and we have to pay for them. I think it's ridiculous that you have to, when you are paying for a government agency, and this is no disrespect to the people that work at the DMV, that you have to wait 5 hours, and that's just the way it is. That's anti-American. That's anti the way this country was built, right? So, I'm not anti the Star card. I am anti how government works. And getting back to this issue concerning the grocery tax, the governor set the agenda. It was the same governor when he was running as lieutenant governor that said he would be in favor of repealing the grocery tax. I don't believe any of the politicians, with the exception of our few great conservatives that participate and call into this program, really want the repeal of the grocery tax. They're going to use it next year to, as we predicted, unfortunately. We don't like to be right on this one. Unfortunately, to what? To use it for their political gain. And you think, well, that's not a big deal. Think about the year of tax revenue that you'll have to pay additionally before it is repealed. Traffic and weather together. Our time is 6:27. You're listening to KIDO Talk Radio on 107.5 FM, 580 AM with Kevin Miller in the morning. Good morning, Dave. And I'm Kevin Miller in the morning, KIDO Talk Radio. So, not repealing the grocery tax. And you don't have a lot of reporters or anybody that will call out the governor for this. Look, we like the governor personally. We would like it that, and again, here's the skinny on this. I had a chance to talk to Ray Amaya, the vice president of producing here, the senior executive producer, the person that figures out the show. And I said, did we ever hear from Governor Little's press office? Did they ever send us a press release? Because I want to be fair before we go public. Well, no, Kevin Miller. And I'm thinking to myself, well, it's not really our job to be the dissemination arm of the state. Sure, we like lawmakers to come on. That's okay. We'd love to hear from you in particular. But we haven't heard from the press office. And look, when people don't do their job, just like with the Star ID card, I think that they should be held to task. I don't know why the governor's press office doesn't reach out, and that's cool. We're good because then we're not beholden to politicians. But this is a major issue when we're talking about repealing the grocery tax, that because you have folks that have relationships won't go after these people and say, look, why didn't you do it? I would like to know, and, Mike Moyle listens to this show, the House Majority Leader. Well, I was going to say he's sleeping in, but no, he's a farmer, so he's out probably tilling the fields in Star right now. And we'll reach out to Mr. Moyle, to State Representative, to Majority Leader Moyle, and ask him. He predicted it. Tommy Ahlquist and I, Inspire Excellence podcast, he predicted it and goes, nope, it's not going to happen. Janice McGeehan, Lieutenant Governor on the show, said it's going to happen. And the governor sets the agenda. Well, that doesn't work in Congress. Why does it work here? We had that with Governor Otter. Remember, the gas tax. Well, we're not going to pass one. Well, we're going to pass one in the middle of the night. I mean, repealing the grocery tax is important. Even if you don't agree with its repeal, it should have been brought before a hearing. But the reason why they didn't do that was very simple. If it got to a hearing, the immense public pressure would put people on the spot to make that decision, to live up to their word. You do that with your children. You do that with your grandchildren. Boy, one of the most humbling things I can imagine is being a parent, because you have to be a role model. That's what a good parent is. Why don't we have that same connection with our officials? I'm not saying they're bad people. Well, Kevin Miller, you don't understand. I understand. I'm a simpleton. You promised something and you didn't deliver. And nobody's going to jump out of the queasy Republican bed and go in with the libs for the simple reason why we don't want the crazy, wacky, zany libs. So that is, how it breaks down. But really, the governor owes it to people to go out and to make a statement on why it didn't happen. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. But we are waiting for the Mueller report. You'll hear the Attorney General's press conference. We've got expert analysis. Congressman Fulcher will join us at 580-5436, 580-KIDO. But your prediction on the Mueller report, we'll take that. And get this, apparently the First Amendment does not apply in a Western high school.
As we were taking pictures, a police officer approached us and said, we are asking you to leave the campus right now.
We'll tell you why next. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio, 107.5 FM, 580 AM. Good morning, Doug. Quickly to Capitol Hill, KIDO Talk Radio, your home for Fox News Radio in the Treasure Valley. Rachel Sutherland standing by at the epicenter of everything. Good morning, Rachel.
Hey, good morning, Kevin.
Here we have it. Who would have thought? I was joking with you and Jared Halpern that this would be Friday at 4:45. This is good that the Mueller report's going to be released today, right?
I think so. It gives us time to digest it going into the holiday weekend. And here in less than an hour, we're expecting the Attorney General William Barr and Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein to hold a news conference at the Justice Department. We understand Barr has arrived. He's there. And maybe this will start on time. It's expected to last about 30 minutes. He's going to explain the redaction process. Also, I think this is key, he's going to explain any kind of executive privilege that may or may not have been invoked, and also conversations between the Justice Department and the White House ahead of this release today. There was a New York Times report last night that said that there have been conversations, so he will address that as well. Again, the news conference expected to last about 30 minutes. As he was walking into the Justice Department, his demeanor described as calm, so it sounds like he's ready for game day.
Boy, some of the Republicans and the conservatives say the goalposts keep changing on this. What will be the predicted reaction to this? Will it be Republicans good, Democrats bad? Some people speculate that the president could get some flack over this.
Well, it could be that there's some information in the report that's not flattering to the president. That could be. We haven't seen it yet, so we don't know. Oftentimes, as you know, in this business, we may get an embargoed report ahead of time so that we can digest and be prepared. In this case, I don't know if the Justice Department was deeply concerned about leaks, but we did not get that. So what you're going to see is reporters in real time trying to break down 400 pages and get that information out quickly, get headlines out quickly. But also we have to be judicious in it and not just pick out a headline that's out of context without understanding where it's coming from and how it plays out with the rest of the report. So I think a lot of people just have to pack their patience today. It's certainly an undertaking to try to report on that lengthy of a document as it happens.
Well, no, it kind of reminds me of Bush v. Gore when people were, when we had paper and people were trying to break this down, Rachel, as you said, as they were reading it for the first time.
Exactly. So very much that situation. And Democrats, though, are already up in arms about the way that this is being handled. They're suggesting that Barr is actually trying to spin the report ahead of time. And we know that House Judiciary Chair Jerry Nadler is already threatening a subpoena to the Justice Department as soon as tomorrow for the full unredacted report. Congress is upset, at least Democrats are upset, that this news conference is being held before they even see the report. So they are accusing, again, the Justice Department of basically being in the pocket of the White House, saying that the Attorney General is really just being a PR representative for the president. Barr, though, probably couldn't do anything right at this point because of the explosiveness of this situation. So soon, and here in about 45 minutes, we should be hearing from the Attorney General, and we're going to be hearing about that. And I'm sure, reporters may have questions. I don't know if he's going to take questions. Though it's a 30-minute news conference, it doesn't really sound like it.
Yeah, we'll have to see how that plays out. Rachel, anything else? This is it for the day, huh?
I think we need to be looking for reaction from Democrats. We also have heard a call from House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Minority Leader Chuck Schumer to have Robert Mueller actually come to the Hill and testify. And it could be that there's a court battle over the release of the unredacted report. So even after today, and we have read maybe the 400 pages, we've gotten through it, I think that the fight will continue. I don't think this is going to be over even after the report is released.
Rachel, thank you.
Thanks, Kevin.
Rachel Sutherland joining us, Kevin Miller in the morning, KIDO Talk Radio. Let's go to the phones. We're joined by Liberty Linda. Liberty Linda, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Kevin. Our founding fathers gave us a constitutional republic, and yet all Democrats call us a democracy, and even some of our Republicans call us a democracy. The question I always ask, Kevin, is how can someone run for president if they don't even know what kind of government our country has? And now they want to change it to communism. I remember when I was a little girl and my grandfather walking back and forth in front of me, shaking his fist about communism because he lived through World War II and what happened in Germany. And the people today, I don't believe they're teaching our children what happened back then. And so it really bothers me what I see going on in our country. And Kevin, it's wonderful to tune into your show every morning and hear truth. I say keep it up. Thank you for telling truth. I love it, Kevin. So anyway, I love what you have to say, and I love President Trump as well.
What do you make of this Mueller report? If you don't like the president, you're like the devious little libs, and they're using, and this is where the libs are so unoriginal, where they're so goofy, Liberty Linda, because they go, well, they went to the courts. Yeah, they went to the courts with illegal, speculative, unsubstantiated information.
It's much to do about nothing. Absolutely. And we've been sitting here watching it now since the beginning of when Trump took over. And nothing happened over there. I'd rather our countries get along and not be fighting back and forth with Russia. We don't want that. Yes, in every election, every country wants to know what's going on in the elections in other countries. And that happened, yes. But there was no collusion. There was none of that. And I think most of the people of the United States are aware of that. And what they're pushing on us, we're just tired of hearing it. That's the way I feel. And you're right. You stick up. Kevin, you have this way about, what's right. And that's why people love tuning into your show every day. And we like to hear truth.
Well, and the politicians, they don't like to tell the truth. And back to this grocery tax thing. I mean, you talk about the giant bait and switch that was done on the people of Idaho.
Yeah. We've been fighting for how many years? You know, through your show, through the people there. You know, doesn't our governor get it? Don't they get it? I'm sorry, I'm still in Idaho, and I love Idaho. I love the people in Idaho.
They're holding you prisoner in Utah.
Lovely people here.
What's that Utah like? Is it Idaho light?
The people here are absolutely wonderful. They're just so loving and kind, and, you know, I have family here. They're wonderful. And you know, the people in Idaho, I miss Idaho so much, and I have family still there, but my circumstances, you know, I just can't quite get back up there. And I just love it there. And I miss the Miller Militia so much and all the meetings and everything, you know. I'm a part of you, and I always will be.
You are. And, you know, you guys are dropping out on me. I got you in Utah, and we understand, and you're in our prayers every night. We got Tea Party Bob. He's retreating up north. It's going to be me and security guard Mike and Terry pretty soon. That's it.
I know. And I miss every one of you. And yeah, I don't understand why Bob's moving up north. I mean, I would think he'd want to stay there. There are many good Californians moving there, even though they're raising, you know, the rents and everything is the reason why I had to leave. Didn't want to. Yeah, but anyway, I'm here with family, and they've helped me out.
Well, and you know, that's a blessing. Liberty Linda, I got to run, but God bless.
Oh, you as well, Kevin. We love you. Keep up the good work.
We love you. Take care now.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Kevin Miller in the morning, KIDO Talk Radio. Coming up next, a man is in custody after bringing in gas lighters into St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York City. As we've said before, we hope and we pray that the Notre Dame Cathedral is restored. Some people are upset about this, saying, why are you giving all this money to the church? Look, it's a symbol. If people want to give money to have that rebuilt, so be it. It's funny, though, because people have a problem with Christ. People have a problem with Christianity. People have a problem with loving God. And we see this. I don't know if you heard about this, but apparently, what is it, atheism? Actually, they're more atheists now than Christians. Well, than a sect of Christianity, Catholicism. But you have more people not believing in God. So you have all these. And look, okay, it's Holy Thursday. I'll say it. You have a lot of these God haters that don't like the Lord, that don't like people of faith, that view us all as hypocrites, that view us all as, well, you deplorable Christians. Can't understand why people would want to rebuild that church, number one, or that they would want to give to a great local or national charity. We're just getting started. We're trying to keep up with our friend Sean Hannity. You're listening to Kevin Miller. Speaking of Sean Hannity, you're listening to your home for Hannity, KIDO Talk Radio.
The Department of Justice has informed the committee that it will receive a copy between 11 a.m. and noon, well after the Attorney General's 9:30 a.m. press conference.
The last time I checked, the Constitution has three branches of government, an executive branch, a legislative branch, and a judicial branch. And the executive branch and the Attorney General can do whatever he wants to do. It's not for the legislative branch to tell them what to do or how to conduct themselves. He can have 1 press conferences or 10 press conferences.
We'll have to take the time over the next couple of days to carefully read the redacted report so that we don't find out that, in fact, there's very little left out.
There were no Russians. The file cabinet was empty the entire time. The only Russians they had were the Russians that Steele, who was working with the Democrats, those were the Russians, you know, the Fusion GPS Russians. Fusion GPS is the firm that the Clinton campaign hired to dirty up the Trump campaign.
There we have it. It's going to be good. Attorney General Barr, we'll hear from him coming up next. Your thoughts, 580-5436, 580-KIDO. First, let's get you to work safely and on time. KIDO Talk Radio, 107.5 FM, 580 AM, traffic and weather together. Good morning, Dave. Thank you, Larry. Earlier, we were talking about a man with gas, lighters, and bad intentions trying to walk into St. Pat's Cathedral in New York. Is this a coordinated attack or just some deluded nut?
A man carrying several gallons of gasoline, lighter fluid, and lighters stopped Wednesday night at St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York City.
As he enters the cathedral, he's confronted by a cathedral security officer who asks him where he's going, informs him he can't proceed into the cathedral carrying these things.
New York's Deputy Police Commissioner John Miller says the man left the church, but police officers caught him. He told them he was only using the cathedral as a shortcut to his car, which he said was out of gas. They found it. It wasn't. Police say the man is undergoing a psychiatric evaluation. Jack Callahan, Fox News.
Thank you, Big Jack. We appreciate that. Thank you to the men and women of law enforcement, not only in Idaho, but in New York, and those that dedicate themselves to keeping us safe and their families who unequivocally support them with their unconditional love. Our thoughts and prayers to the recent death, the recent tragedy of a Washington deputy that was killed in the line of duty. So here we have some misguided fool going into St. Pat's trying to, well, light it up. This is crazy, the world that we live in today, where we have, and we've seen this movie before, where you've had churches in the American South, in the American West, throughout the world, over there in the Middle East with ISIS, when they're going after our Christian brothers and sisters. They want to destroy our Western civilization. They want to destroy Christianity. And here we have it, Holy Week. And again, Holy Week is, we're talking about the Last Supper today. Tomorrow, Good Friday. Yeah, we said it. We're proud of this. In America today, here, as long as Kevin Miller here is on KIDO Talk Radio, don't know how long that is, we're going to talk about faith, because faith should not be marginalized. Faith should not be put in the closet. We should not be afraid to tell others we love God and to do our very best to live as Christ lived. We're just starting. Mueller Report next. Kevin Miller, stay with us. KIDO Talk Radio.